Good evening, everybody. In holding in my hands the United Nations Universal Charter of Human Rights, I feel as if I'm holding a sacred document. I don't read it every day, but I downloaded it because I was asked to give this presentation this evening. But it really did strike me as a kind of sacred document. It sets out so much of what we, particularly those of us who are people of faith, of what we value most about human beings and the duty that we have to preserve those values. I was thinking particularly of Articles 13, 14, 15, and they're very relevant to what we're thinking about this evening. During this week focusing upon the harmony of faiths, my thoughts are rather heretical. Actually, I'm glad to say, I was going to say I'm afraid to say, but I'm not, I'm glad to say. They're a bit heretical. I think the harmony of faiths is a much more likely achievement than the harmony of religions. People, usually those who have no religious allegiance, sometimes claim that religions have caused more wars, continue to cause more wars, than any other grouping. That religion is often the source of disharmony, and I can see why they might say that. Religions, not faiths, can bring out the tribal in us and set up umbrellas for us, for their adherents. Notice I don't call them faithful, for their adherents, to shelter under and provide labels with which to identify. Listen to this. I was surprised to find this in the novel that I'm reading from my reading group, but here it is. Quote, "I saw a man on a bridge about to jump. I said, 'Don't do it.' He said, 'Nobody loves me.' I said, 'God loves you. Do you believe in God?' He said, 'Yes.' I said, 'Are you a Muslim or a non-Muslim?' He said, 'A Muslim.' I said, 'Shia or Sunni?' He said, 'Sunni.' I said, 'Me too.' 'Deobandi or Baralevi?' He said, 'Baralevi.' I said, 'Me too.' 'Tansihi or Tafkiri?' I said, 'Tansihi.' I said, 'Me too.' 'Tansihi Azmati or Tansihi Fahati?' He said, 'Tansihi Fahati.' I said, 'Me too.' 'Tansihi Fahati Jamia ul Ulum Amer or Tansihi Fahati Jamia ul Nur Miwat?' He said, 'Tansihi Fahati Jamia ul Nur Miwat.' I said, 'Me too. Die, kafir.' And I pushed him off. Well, that sounds exaggerated, but listen to this. Radio 4, Monday evening, I heard Viktor Orban, the leader of the Hungarians, I believe, say this. "This, Hungary, is a Christian country, and we have a sovereign right to say who will and who will not live amongst us." And I found myself and find myself saying to you, what version of Christianity is that? I want to tell you a third story, if I may, which I hope is a counter, both from the point of view of Christianity and of Islam. Its details I learned in greater degree this year only. I'd known for a long time that the founder of the order to which I belong, Francis of Assisi, had met the Sultan in the 12th century when he was sent on crusade. I didn't know it quite in this detail, though. Thank you, YouTube. He was sent on crusade by Pope Innocent III in 1219, I think. I don't remember which crusade, but they were all such bloodletting affairs, it really hardly matters. People were told that to kill a crusader on the other side was not murder, it was virtue. Francis, when he was sent on crusade, first of all, went to see the person who'd sent him and said, please call this off. It can't be a good thing. Whatever it is we think we're saving in the Holy Land, it's not worth this. However, it wasn't called off. So he went on crusade with a lone companion to meet the Sultan of Egypt, Malik al-Kamil, himself involved in a crusade defending the holy places. Now, Francis and his companion were captured by the Sultan's forces and were brought as a spy before Malik. When asked who had sent them into the Sultan's camp, Francis answered that he had not been sent by any man, but he had been sent by God. We don't know how long it took the Sultan to believe this fairly impossible and possibly tall story, but eventually, apparently, he did. It transpired that Malik was himself more interested in God and in what people could know about God than he was in the identity of a spy, or even apparently in the protection of the holy places, because these two sat down to have conversations. They were both men of God, and they both left that impression on each other. In due time, the Sultan provided protection for the Franciscans back to their transport. And Francis went home to Europe to encourage all those over whom he had any influence to imitate some of the Muslim ways. But particularly the frequency of prayer had inspired him. And so, and it still exists in some Christian countries and in some Christian traditions, the thrice daily Angelus was adopted by the Christian faith. It wasn't quite 5 times a day prayer, but at least it was 3 times a day prayer. Each of us has within the teachings of our faith what it takes to counter discrimination, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. In my own, the ministry of Jesus gives testimony to his option for the outcast, the foreigner, the sinner, the dispossessed. If I were to launch into my Holy Scriptures, which story would I recite? The Good Samaritan? The story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector, reformed and taken into the fold? The sinful woman who was allowed to a feast and to touch the body of Jesus, and then became part of his band? The story of the 10 lepers? A demoniac? So, I as a Christian have plenty of teaching to counsel me against discriminating, to give me reason not to fall for the sanitizing rhetoric of ethnic cleansing, and to recognize the evils of genocide. And it seems to me that you all, within the teachings of your own faiths, could stand alongside mine. You too have those teachings. If this is so, I think we have to ask, why do these things continue to happen? Why are we powerless to stop them? A very current parable about this is to be found in Pope Francis's recent pastoral visit to Myanmar. Humphrey has just told us a little bit more about what goes on in countries that don't have the infrastructure that we're used to. You all know about the Rohingya and how they have been removed ethnically cleansed from their land, disowned by the land and the people, their neighbours, in which they lived, and that they had taken flight into Bangladesh. When he visited, the Pope was warned not to refer to the Rohingya in Myanmar. It was a forbidden word, including, he was warned, by the Catholic cardinal of that country, who feared persecution for the Catholic minority if he did. And he complied, at least in public. Eventually, at a mass in Bangladesh, he was able to take off his gag. Today, the name of God is Rohingya, he announced, as small groups of them stood near him at the altar. I suggest that this might be a parable because the Pope was almost silenced, and then he found a way to speak the truth. I think that this is what we have to do as people of faith. We have to find a way to speak the truth, not simply to one another, but to secular bodies, our own parliament, our own governments, our own local governments, or international bodies like the United Nations. These offer us an opportunity to go beyond just speaking the language that everybody here understands. I'm just coming to the end, but I hope I may be forgiven for speaking largely from my own faith context. Your faith leaders may be leading you in a similar way as our current Pope is, but in this area, Francis is giving us a strong direction. In his message, Pope Francis wrote for the Day of Peace at the beginning of 2018, which was all about the human rights of migrants and refugees. He said this: "It is my hope, heartfelt hope, that the spirit of St. Paul's words," and then he quoted them, "you are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people. It is my heartfelt hope that these words will guide the process that in the course of 2018 will lead the United Nations to draft and approve 2 global compacts. One for safe, orderly and regular migration, the other for refugees. As shared agreements at a global level, these compacts will provide a framework for policy proposals and practical measures. For this reason, they need to be inspired by compassion, foresight, and courage, so as to take advantage of every opportunity to advance the peace-building process. Only in this way can the realism required of international politics avoid surrendering to cynicism and to the globalization of indifference." Just going to read that last sentence again. Only in this way can the realism required of international politics avoid surrendering to cynicism and to the globalization of indifference.